What if I told you that the way you live your life, the desires you have, your preferences, needs, views, even your thoughts don't actually come from you? Everything you consider to be your individual reality, your own choice, has long ago become social reality. It is directly dependent on social power and is shaped by it. You may feel how surface level, fake, and oftentimes meaningless everything seems to be. Most of the time, it feels like that you don't actually live a life, but merely observe it, like a spectator at a show. If you found this video, you've started asking the right questions. And if you're still watching it, I'm here to give you the answers. Well, actually not me, but a man named Debord. In 1967, he wrote a book, The Society of the Spectacle, which explains how we've been incarcerated in the 9-to-5 job prison, conditioned to spend our lives chasing money, indulging consumption of pseudo-necessary things, and instead of actually living and creating, passively observe events that are happening around us, scrolling our lives away, merely existing in the spectacle created and orchestrated by the very few. But how did this happen? What is a spectacle, and how can we escape this matrix? According to Debord, the spectacle is the way of life that we currently live, in which reality is replaced by representations, appearances, and images. It creates a system where life is no longer directly experienced, but instead observed from a distance, through screens, advertisements, and media narratives. At its core, the spectacle is a worldview imposed by the ruling order, reinforcing its power and influence. It transforms the way we see ourselves and interact with the world, turning everything into a staged performance rather than genuine lived experiences. The spectacle functions as both a tool and a product of modern capitalism. It upholds the existing social, political, and economic systems by presenting a distorted version of reality. This illusion of reality maintains control, encouraging passive acceptance rather than active questioning. To put it simply, the spectacle transforms individuals into spectators, not participants, in their own lives. The spectacle emerged alongside the development of capitalism, particularly during the Industrial Revolution. As societies shifted from agrarian to industrial economies, the focus moved from meeting basic needs to producing goods for profit. The rise of mass production created a surplus of commodities, and with that came the need to market and sell these goods to the public. If the basis of earlier societies was the economic necessity, it has now been replaced by the necessity for boundless economic development. Over time, the spectacle became an integral part of modern industry. It wasn't just about selling products anymore, it was and is about selling a lifestyle, an identity, and an image. Media technologies like newspapers, radio, and eventually television accelerated this process, allowing the spectacle to reach every corner of society and the world. By the mid-20th century, the spectacle had solidified its dominance, shaping not only how people consumed goods, but also how they perceived themselves and the world. The spectacle has become the primary means of communication in our modern society. It speaks a universal language, one that constantly affirms the values of consumption, superficiality, and conformity. This system shapes not only what we see, but also how we think and feel. The spectacle is a permanent opium war which aims to make people identify goods with commodities and satisfaction with survival that increases according to its own laws. Automation drives the commodity world toward the following contradiction. The technical equipment which objectively eliminates labor must at the same time preserve labor as a commodity and as the only source of the commodity. If the social labor engaged by the society is not to diminish because of automation, then new jobs have to be created. The entire economy became a process of quantitative development. This incessant expansion of economic power in the form of the commodity, which transformed human labor into commodity labor, into wage labor, cumulatively led to an abundance in which the primary question of survival is undoubtedly resolved, but in such a way that it is constantly rediscovered. It is continually posed again, each time at a higher level. The production of commodities reaches a level of abundance which requires a surplus of collaboration from the worker. The satisfaction of primary human needs is replaced by an uninterrupted fabrication of pseudo-needs, which are reduced to the single pseudo-need of maintaining the reign of the autonomous economy. In other words, the sole goal of the economy is development, which is now only measured by the quantity of commodities, not quality or necessity. This system keeps recreating the same cycle. Even though we can now easily produce enough for everyone's basic needs, people still have to work to survive, just at increasingly higher levels of consumption. The economy depends on constantly making people want and buy more things, as without consumption it would simply collapse. The spectacle operates in several distinct ways, all of which contribute to its pervasive influence. Separation and alienation. The spectacle thrives on separation. It divides people from their own experiences, from meaningful relationships, and even from themselves. Rather than directly engaging with the world, individuals engage with representations of the world, creating a sense of alienation. This alienation isn't just emotional, but also practical, as people are distanced from the results of their labor and the decisions that affect their lives. People are encouraged to live through screens, advertisements, and curated images rather than engaging with the real world. Authentic emotions, relationships, and experiences are overshadowed by the need to conform to the expectations of the spectacle. Lived reality is materially invaded by the contemplation of the spectacle while simultaneously absorbing the spectacular order, giving it positive cohesiveness. Objective reality is present on both sides. Reality rises up within the spectacle, and the spectacle is real. The more he contemplates, the less he lives. The more he accepts recognizing himself in the dominant images of need, the less he understands his own existence and his own desires. His own gestures are no longer his, but those of another who represents them to him. This is why the spectator feels at home nowhere, because the spectacle is everywhere. To add to this point, Karl Marx, who critiqued capitalism, believed that labor was the creative capacity through which humans develop and express themselves. However, in modern times, we encounter the alienation of labor. Those who work no longer own the products of their labor. Moreover, the work itself is now perceived as difficult and meaningless. Marx argues that at some point people become strangers not only to each other, but also to themselves. Instead of enjoying labor as a process of self-development, we flee from it as if it were the plague. People see freedom not in their daily work, but in leisure, vacation, and so forth. Transformation of being into having. One of the most significant characteristics of the spectacle is its emphasis on consumption. Human worth is no longer measured by who we are, but by what we have. Material possessions and superficial appearances are elevated above personal growth, creativity, or authenticity. Over time, this obsession with having, rather than being, becomes central to how we see ourselves and others. The dominance of vision. Modern society, driven by the spectacle, places an overwhelming emphasis on visual stimuli. This shift from other sensory experiences to sight aligns perfectly with the goals of the spectacle, as vision is the easiest sense to manipulate through media and advertising. Reality becomes something to observe rather than experience, further entrenching passivity. Advertising and media constantly tell us that we need more possessions, more validation, more status. These manufactured desires keep us trapped in a cycle of consumption, chasing an unattainable ideal that only benefits those in power. Services, the tertiary sector, swell the ranks of the army of distribution and are a eulogy to the current commodity. The satisfaction which no longer comes from the use of abundant commodities is now sought in the recognition of their value as commodities. The use of commodities becomes sufficient unto itself. The consumer is filled with religious fervor for the sovereign liberty of the commodities. Waves of enthusiasm for a given product, supported and spread by all the media of communication, are thus propagated with lightning speed. A style of dress emerges from a film. A magazine promotes night spots which launch various clothing fads. One who collects the keychains which have been manufactured for collection accumulates the indulgences of the commodity, a glorious sign of his real presence among the faithful. Reified man advertises the proof of his intimacy with the commodity. The fetishism of commodities reaches moments of fervent exaltation, similar to the ecstasies of the convulsions and miracles of the old religious fetishism. The illusion of choice. The spectacle offers what seems like an endless array of choices, but these choices are superficial. The options we are presented with often come from the same system that controls the spectacle. For example, choosing between different brands of the same product might feel empowering, but it keeps us confined within the same framework of consumption. Time and history erased. The spectacle frames time as an eternal present, erasing the past and discouraging thoughts of the future. By focusing on immediate gratification and constant entertainment, it prevents individuals from reflecting on historical struggles or envisioning alternatives to the current system. Initially, Debord identified two forms of the spectacle in society: concentrated and diffuse. But with time, society reached what he called the integrated spectacle stage. This stage is characterized by several key principles: continuous technological development, integration of state and economy, total secrecy, and the irrefutability of lies. The spectacle is controlled by those who benefit most from its existence: corporations, governments, and media conglomerates. These entities use the spectacle to maintain control, ensuring that individuals remain passive and compliant. The spectacle disguises inequality and oppression, presenting them as natural or even desirable. One of the primary goals of the spectacle was to eliminate genuine historical understanding. Otherwise, the spectacle would not work. With the destruction of history, contemporary events themselves retreat into a remote and fabulous realm of unverifiable stories, uncheckable statistics, unlikely explanations, and untenable reasoning. One aspect of the disappearance of all objective historical knowledge can be seen in the way that individual reputations have become malleable and alterable at will by those who control all information. Information which is gathered, and also, an entirely different matter, information which is broadcast. Their ability to falsify is thus unlimited. Historical evidence which the spectacle does not need to know ceases to be evidence. This creates a situation where current events become increasingly difficult to verify or understand, lost in a maze of unreliable statistics and vague explanations. We've reached a paradoxical state where censorship has become incredibly sophisticated, yet people believe themselves to be free while having minimal influence over their own lives. The authenticity of information has become so compromised that the only truly reliable knowledge is what we personally witness, creating a society where deception reaches unprecedented levels despite, or perhaps because of, our advanced information technology. This is particularly relevant to our current digital age, where information manipulation, fake news, and the rapid spread of misinformation have become major concerns. Today's digital landscape exemplifies Debord's integrated spectacle, where reality and representation have become nearly indistinguishable. Social media, targeted advertising, and algorithmic content delivery have created an environment where the separation between authentic experience and mediated reality is increasingly blurred. Breaking free from the spectacle requires more than individual lifestyle changes or digital detoxes. It demands a fundamental reconsideration of how we relate to media, technology, and consumption. The challenge isn't merely to escape the spectacle, an impossible task in our interconnected world, but to develop new forms of resistance and authentic experience while acknowledging our existence within it. Understanding the spectacle's mechanics, as Debord helped us do, remains the first step toward maintaining our humanity in an increasingly mediated world. While the spectacle might seem all-encompassing, it is possible to resist its influence. You've already made the first step, which is being aware of what the spectacle is, a system designed to control and manipulate. Question the messages you receive from media and advertising. Ask yourself whose interests are being served by the images and narratives you consume. Be mindful of how much time and energy you devote to social media platforms. Remember that the spectacle relies on passivity, so by actively shaping your life, you can undermine its control.